Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The NFL schedule dropped Wednesday night, and the Browns were largely ignored. They don't have a primetime game and play only once after 1 p.m. Expectations are low, and excitement isn't in the forecast, at least in the opinion of the schedule makers. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, hello. Did you say largely ignored or completely ignored?
I softened it a little bit.
Yeah, right. Besides the London game, which that's kind of prime time. Well, it's not prime time, but at least it's national, right? I mean, everyone will watch that.
Yeah,
But
it's a standalone 9:30 a.m. game. Yep.
yeah, standalone 9:30. Which I actually don't mind, by the way. I actually, with like my schedule, and waking up early, it's not too bad. But yeah, no, just completely. But anyone that's complaining about it, I mean, do you blame the NFL? I mean, the NFL, we've done this now. How many years in a row have you and I talked schedule on this podcast? But we've done differing levels of, hey, too many early primetime games, and then the NFL gets burned. Then we've seen them give them a lot of late primetime games because then they want to see how they do, and maybe they'll be okay, and then they can flex them out of it. This year, they just said, hey, we're not putting you in prime time. And to be honest with you, it's tough to blame, right? I mean, I'm surprised they didn't get at least one.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's it, Judd, is they went 3-14 last year. You don't know who's going to play quarterback. You got Jerry Jeudy, but then he's your really only quote unquote, I don't know if he counts as a big name skill player. You get two rookie running backs, you get David Njoku. So the biggest name players on this team, you have Shadur Sanders, who may or may not make the team, may or may not play at all, the rookie quarterback, and then you get Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, but those guys are on the defensive side of the ball, and that's a tough matchup to sell to a primetime audience. So to me, it boils down to the Browns aren't supposed to be good, and you don't know who the quarterback is, and the league has shifted in the last, I don't know, 5 years, but I think even more recently than that, to really making an effort to have the primetime games be worthwhile and exciting for the entire fan base. And I'm sure it's connected to the ratings and the huge sums of money that these networks and streaming services are paying for the rights to broadcast these games. So they try to do everything they can to give NBC and ESPN and Prime and Netflix, whoever else I'm missing, Fox, all the best games. Well, not Fox isn't prime time, but even the standalone 420 games, the best games possible. So that's why you see the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs have 7 primetime games. Right? I think the Eagles have 5. The Cowboys have 6, and we could argue about the Cowboys if they're going to be good, but they're always relevant and they're popular. So I think it's twofold. No expectations of the Browns and really slanting the schedule toward trying to make these primetime matchups as desirable as possible for the entire nation.
Yeah, I thought they'd get at least one Thursday game. They do well on Thursday nights, maybe a Bengals Steelers matchup or something that you see almost every year. But listen, if they end up being a better team, they can get flexed in later in the year. I mean, the NFL, it's not like the NFL's stuck. And if the Browns, in the past, they would be stuck before the flexing. And let's just say the Browns came out of nowhere and were this great team and didn't have any. Well, they're not stuck because they can just put the Browns in prime time in a flex situation.
That's exactly right. And, I don't know if this is something Kevin Stefanski would use as motivation, but I think you could. Hey, we're totally disrespected. Nobody has us. Nobody wants to see us play. Let's prove them wrong and let's flex ourselves into some games late in the year. And they have some opponents late in the year that would be attractive if the Browns are any good. They have Buffalo late. They have Pittsburgh and Cincinnati late. So if the Browns are in this thing, could you see Buffalo, Cleveland on December 21st or Buffalo or Cleveland, Pittsburgh on December 28th? Flexed? Yeah, if those games meant anything, certainly.
Yeah. this is one of the more boring schedules they've had in a while. I mean, 13 1 o'clock starts, right? And not many 4 o'clock starts, and then you got the London game. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry right there.
Yeah, I think it's 14. So there's 2 425 or 4 425 games back to back. November 16th, home versus the Ravens is a 425er. And then the next week they go to Vegas, so it's 405, but it's only 1 o'clock in Vegas. And then that 9:30 London game. Everything else is 1 o'clock.
Well, no, the week 18 is a TBD.
Oh, good. That's a great point. That's a great point. You're right. So 13 out of 16 games. No, my bad. I was thinking of 17. I forgot the TBD. Right. So that's all dependent. Yeah.
My daughters are really good in math, and it's rubbing off on me for these podcasts.
I thought you were still thinking about a 16-game schedule. I'm like, no, I got it, but you're 100% right. Yeah, they leave that last week open just because they don't know what, they try to keep it as fair as possible. They try to put all the division games, if they can, at the same time slot. So you're right. That could be anything but 1 o'clock. It could be a Saturday game. You just don't know. So you're right about that.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Odds in Vegas would be 1 o'clock.
Yeah, right. No doubt.
Yeah, but well, let's look at, first of all, I got to tell you, and we're talking about it now, and people want to hear. I am not listen. People are listening to us right now because they want to break down the schedule, and I get it. But I do have to laugh the last 2 days just listening in the car, driving around on Sports Talk Radio, the different shows trying to break down what their record is going to be and how all the games are going to go. And we'll do it a little bit like maybe early in the year I could see. But, Scott, I mean, how can you really go through the schedule? We have no idea, really. Now, listen, for the most part, Kansas City is going to be good. Philadelphia is going to be good. But there's so much parity in the league and turnover year to year. It's just impossible to truly try to predict how the Browns are going to be and how they're going to do week in and week out.
Oh, Chud, you're exactly right. And which it made me think when you started to say that, it made me think about all the over-unders that the betting sites put out there. And it's the betting sites, but it used to be Vegas. You could go to Vegas and bet, the over-under on any NFL team. I wonder how accurate those are on a year-to-year basis, because you're really taking a lot of leaps by, and the Browns, depending on where you look, it's 4.5 or 5.5 for their over-under win total. But there's so much you don't know. Vegas knows everything, but they don't know, or they don't know who's quarterbacking for the Browns, just if you want to just keep it to the Browns. So if we're talking about, okay, how are you going to predict the Browns versus the Bengals week 1? We don't know who's going to play quarterback. It's of Cincinnati. I'm assuming Trey Hendrickson's not going to be in Cincinnati, but you don't know. There's a bunch of variables, and that's one game for 2 teams. Let alone, is Aaron Rodgers going to be in Pittsburgh? Is Patrick Mahomes going to stay healthy? You can just go down the list of anything, and the health would be the main factor. You can look at rosters and you think you have a decent idea. You don't know what kind of rookie impacts rookies are going to have. I'm sure Washington's over-under was low last year. Jane Daniels plays fantastic, and they win a bunch of games and go to the NFC Championship game. So if Cam Ward has the same impact for Tennessee would go over whatever their win total is, right? So there's just so many variables, with injuries, I would say, being the biggest one, that I wonder how true those over-unders are. And not that I'm sure you could make some money if you pick the right ones, but I don't know how you know which right one, what the right ones are to pick. But it's a fascinating thing, but it doesn't stop anybody from predicting all the games and, giving a record, May 16th, about 4 months before the season starts.
Yeah, no question. I mean, listen, if Shedeur Sanders ends up being the starting quarterback and and ends up doing well, let's say, that skews the over-under. It also skews primetime games later. They'll jump on board that. If that happens, it's a much different story than if, Kenny Pickett's the QB and they're losing games, or, I don't know, Flacco brings a lot of interest here in Cleveland, right? But not nationally. So, the fact that they don't know who the starting quarterback is, that is a big deal. Week 1, though, I do like the way week 1 shapes out. because they're at home and because it's the Bengals who traditionally don't start well, regardless, I mean, even with Joe Burrow. And, the Browns they've kind of swung things around, Scott. They're, 3-2 under Stefanski on their home opener. So, I mean, you could at least point to the first game and break that one down. And even if you don't know who the quarterback is, you could say, I feel like maybe they could win that one.
Yes, and I think before I go back to that, I think you made a good point we're talking about getting flexed. The easiest way for the Browns to get flexed is they win some games early, introduce Sanders as the quarterback. All of a sudden, right, then there's I would think a lot of interest from the networks, okay, or networks and the league. Okay, let's get these guys into prime time. When it comes to the Bengals game, you're 100% right, Chud, that the Bengals have lost their first two games. They've started at least 0-2 the last 3 years. So that gives you, if you're a Browns fan, some confidence. I also tell you that the Bengals last year, when they got off to their terrible start, talked so much about how that's got to change. So that's going to be their number one focus, is the Bengals coming out and trying to get off to a good start, which begins in Cleveland on September 7th. Now, I also think from a Browns perspective, they've had some success against the Bengals. Now, they got swept last year, but I think before that, Stefanski was 6-2 against the Bengals before last year. And one of those losses was the Week 18 game in 2023 where they sat everybody down. So they've had good success against Joe Burrow. Myles Garrett has had good success against Burrow in that offensive line. The Bengals defense looks like it's going to be a mess. Trey Hendrickson is saying he's not going to play for him unless he gets a new contract, and went on showed up at the offseason program and did a long interview with the media, and it was really critical of the Bengals. So I think there's some optimism about that game. I thought I saw the Bengals open as 5-point favorites, I want to say. But when you look at the schedule, Chud, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, like that looks like, to me, the easiest game in the Browns' first six. So there is some pressure to start off well. I think the beginning of the schedule is brutally tough for the Browns, as opposed to last year. Remember last year we talked about how important it was to get off to a good start because it was the easier part of the schedule, and they did a terrible job. Now you can't get around it. Like, they need to win some games early, or I don't know if they need to, but it's going to be really difficult. So if they can get off to a good start, maybe they could get some momentum. Then the schedule eases up a bit, or looks like it will, depending on, a lot of this is based on last year's records, and who's playing quarterback for these teams. And we talk about the Bengals needing, focusing on starting strong. I think the Browns do too, for a couple reasons. One, how bad they were early last year. And two, I think Kevin Stefanski, or there's three reasons. I think Stefanski realized that his training camp was a little too easy last year, and will change that up this year because the season was so bad. They go 3-14. I think you'll see tougher practices this year and less focus on keeping everybody fresh, because they need to come out of the gate ready to go. And the other part of that is they got to figure out who's playing quarterback. And they got a bunch of candidates. So I think practices should be, and I think they will be, longer, so you can get more reps, get a better look at all these quarterbacks. Because you have to make a decision on who's going to play quarterback for you. And then you got to get that guy ready to play.
Scott, and you make a great point when you look back to last year, and kind of backs up the point I made earlier, is that we all thought the Browns are going to be like 3-0 or 3-1 or 4, like, to start last year, but you just never know. Now, I will say this: those first four games, Bengals, and then Ravens, Packers, Lions, we assume all of those teams are going to be good. So that is a brutal first four, no question.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. You look at the NFC North, and you get three in a row there. You get Packers at home, at Detroit, and then you go to London to play the Vikings for quote-unquote home game. I think the Lions won 15, the Vikings won 14, and the Packers won 11 last year. I mean, again, you don't know if things are going to repeat themselves, but there's a lot of reason to think that NFC North's going to be good again. The Browns play really, they're just difficult teams to play. You can look at Minnesota and hope that JJ McCarthy doesn't play as well as Sam Darnold did a year ago, and that's completely possible. He's never played us down in the NFL. But I fully expect Detroit to be really good in that building, and the Packers are usually good. I know it's in Cleveland, but the Browns are going to. I think it's safe to say the Browns are going to be underdogs in at least their first 6 games because they come home from London and go to Pittsburgh. So it's an uphill climb, no matter how you look at it. Now, if they win their first 2, things change, and the perception change, and the odds change. But right now, the start looks incredibly difficult.
Well, yeah, and here's the other thing too that is tough. And granted, you don't always know how the teams are going to be, but you do know life on the road or at home.
Yep.
And I believe they have like 4 out of 5 on the road because, I mean, I know the Vikings game's a home game, but if you count that as a road game, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5 before your bye is on the road.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They only play. So they play Green Bay on September 21st at home. The only other game in Cleveland, because the London game skews everything. So the only game in Cleveland before November 16th. So you're looking at almost 2 months from September 21st to November 16th. The only other game in Cleveland is October 19th versus Miami. So that just adds to the difficulty. You talked about travel to London, playing at Pittsburgh, then you go New England Jets, and those are 2 teams coming off bad years, but they're both road games, and they have the bye in between, which is probably good. It's a good spot to have the bye. It's in the middle. But yeah, that's a really difficult stretch. Now, and Kevin Stefanski said, "Hey, I know we're going to be away from home for a long time. The fans aren't going to see us, but the good part is that late in the year they'll be home a lot. Well, you got to make sure those late games count, right? And hopefully, from a winning standpoint, it's not count because Shadur Sanders is playing and you're getting a look at him, or Dylan Gabriel's playing and you get a look at him. They count for the standings, and there's still talk about trying to get in the playoffs."
So you mentioned the bye week. That comes at a good time in the middle of the year. I hate when they're like, it's week 4 or week 5. Now, Scott, how does that work? They can request that? Is that right?
You mean like when the bye is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chud. I checked with somebody about that this week. I think you can request a bunch of stuff to the league, whether it's if we're playing in LA, can you also put, if you have 2 West Coast games, can you schedule them together so you can try to stay out there or whatever? Like there's a bunch of different requests you can have. For example, and we'll get into this, the Vikings requested to play back-to-back games in Europe. So when you come home from London, teams can either request to go with their bye right away or to wait. The league doesn't have to honor that, but I think they do give you more leeway coming off the long trip to London or wherever it is, right? Wherever the international game is. So I think the Browns chose to wait for their bye rather than saying, let's do it week 6. That they feel like that's too early in the season. They don't think the travel's that bad to London. I think they're going to go kind of midweek and then come back, and then the next week's in Pittsburgh, so that's not a lot of travel. So yeah, I think they really wanted the bye after London. They could have had it, but they believe having the bye in the middle of the season is better.
So just kind of looking for, I don't want to say a soft spot on the schedule necessarily. I don't think we're in a position as Browns fans or media or the Browns themselves to do that, but I think it would probably be Patriots by Jets, Ravens at Raiders.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm trying to think of, I'm calling it up I have it on my screen here.
Because the Ravens is at home.
Yeah.
The Patriots and Jets are not supposed to be, powerhouses. That could change.
Yeah.
You get the bye in there, and then at the Raiders. I mean,
no, you're right. Right around the bye is the easy part. I would say, Tennessee, Chicago back-to-back might be the 2 easiest games. Who knows? Chicago might be good. But
that was next on my list, right?
Yeah,
Titans and Bears and some.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think right in there. I mean, that's the soft part of the schedule. If you want to just start from who knows about Miami, but if you start with Miami in week 7, you can look at each game, go, okay, Miami at home, at New England, at the Jets, Baltimore at home, at Vegas, San Francisco at home, Tennessee at home, at Chicago. Like, if the Browns are any good, there's a bunch of winnable games there. So, yeah, that's so you get the first 6 or the first 5, 6 games are really difficult. Then you get this stretch that looks like quote unquote winnable games, and then you finish Buffalo, Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, right? So I'm with you. So that heart of the schedule is if they're going to make any kind of hay, make any kind of move, that's when I would think would have to be.
Yeah. The best back-to-back scenario would be Titans Bears in December, but it's also in December.
It's a great point. And who knows? I mean, Cam Ward might be great. Caleb Williams might be great in year 2 under Ben Johnson in Chicago. You don't know, but based on last year, yeah, that looks like the 2 easiest games. Just because one of them's at home against Tennessee. You know, like you said, New England Jets back to back with the bye in the middle, but those are both road games, and it's just hard. It's hard to win on the road. So yeah, I'm with you.
And the preseason games, Panthers, Eagles, Rams, they'll have a joint practice with the Eagles. Is that right?
They're going to do joint practices with the Panthers and the Eagles. The Panthers,
both of them. Okay.
Yeah, the Panthers are going to be like one day before the preseason opener, and then they're going to go to Philly for I don't know if it's 2 or 3, probably 2 practices because once you get past 2 practices, things get really really chippy. So they'll do one practice. 1 joint practice in Carolina and 2 joint practices in Philly. Yep.
How
Then
about the Rams?
I was just going to say they make the poor Rams fly across country for the last preseason game. Well, they did that to the Browns last year. Remember they sent them to Seattle for that last preseason game. Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah. Is that like a new trend in the NFL? In week 3 of the preseason, we're going to just pose a team and send them to the other side of the country?
It feels like that. Now, maybe the options, I mean, so much goes into these schedules. And I know, last year they just blamed it on there weren't a whole lot of options for Seattle. But it does feel like you kind of get stuck a little bit there,
What is your favorite game on the schedule and what's your least favorite?
Ooh. Like that I think is going to be a good game, or that like kind of like if I got to go to the game, it'd be cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, this isn't about you, Scott. Why do you have to make everything about yourself?
No, it's my stinking podcast, Chuck.
True story. No, best game. What game stands out that you're most excited about is ooh, that looks like a good one.
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of like the idea of Buffalo in December. You could get some weather. Buffalo has to come here. It's fun watching Josh Allen play. I mean, they could be 14-point favorites depending on how the season goes for the Browns. But that's such a good team and such a great player in Josh Allen that I like that idea. The other one would be London. I think that London game's going to be cool.
Yeah.
I think both teams' fan bases will travel. I know I mentioned these guys on here. I got these knuckleheads that this text thread with a bunch of buddies of mine, and they're already planning to go into London. At least 3 guys. So I think you see a bunch of Browns fans, you see a bunch of Vikings fans. So I think there is. I think 9:30 a.m. in Cleveland, but I think that's going to be a fun game.
I'm going to go, and I would not argue either of those. I think the Bills definitely, and the London game is good. But how about this one? If you can start out the year 1-1, you get one of those wins either against the Bengals or the Ravens, or somehow shock the world and go 2-0. Yeah. Or you're 0-2 and you're in that must win or the season's over. I point to that Packers game. You don't see them in Cleveland that often. It's just two good fan bases. I look at that Packers game as kind of exciting.
Yeah, I like that call. I tell you what, and I hate to say it, but you could see a bunch of Packers fans here.
Yeah.
Depending on the mood of the mood of Browns fans, depending on who your starting quarterback is, what the vibe is heading into the season. And things can change. I mean, there's plenty of chance for there to be optimism. But the Packers have a great fan base. There's probably a lot of Packers fans here, just in general, kind of like, there's Cowboys fans here. That's the way it works. But yeah, that could be a meaningful game, Chud. I'm with you there.
Yeah. Snooze fest. We're gonna have to keep ourselves awake for this 4-week stretch. Dolphins at Patriots bye, and then the Jets.
Yeah.
That's kind of whatever.
Yep. No, I'm with you.
But well, I'm not gonna ask you for a record or anything like that. If you wanna do it, you can. But I mean, at this point, I mean, I'll leave that up to you.
I was just gonna ask you, did you want to do that? You give me
Well,
one.
I mean,
give me one. We're not going to hold anybody to, but just, give me okay, I could see him winning X number of games.
So I think they're going to win more games than people think. I just think that, whenever people think they're going to win 13 or 14, I tend to say, hey, hold back. All right, let's not get too excited. But I also hate when, people get down on them so much because, I mean, they 2 years ago, they weren't a bad team. I mean, they still have some talented pieces. If one of these quarterbacks can just, play average, or gosh, we get someone to really step up. So I'm going to go, and I did not look at every single game and break it down and say, oh, they'll win this one, they'll lose that one. They'll win. I did not do that. But, Scott, I'm going to give them a chance to win 5 or 6.
Okay. I mean, that's not a lot. But it's right around the over-under, like we talked about. I would let me put it because I don't want to give a record right now. I would take the over, whether it's 4.5 or 5.5. I would take the over. I could see them, like, if you go through it, right? This is how I was kind of doing it. Okay, could they beat the Bengals? Yeah. And then after that, then it's like, okay, it's tough. Could they win one of two, Minnesota or the Steelers? We don't know who's playing quarterback for the Steelers. Yeah, they could win one of 2 games. Those two. Could they win one of the 2 next games? Miami and New England. Sure, they could at least win one of 2. So if you kind of couple the games after, let's say after week 4. So let's say they're 1-3 because they beat the Bengals or they steal a game somewhere. They're 1-3, and then all of a sudden you start like coupling the games. They could win 1 or 2, 1 or 2, 1 or 2, and all of a sudden you get to 7 or 8. And that doesn't seem unrealistic to me. We've talked about it a million times. I think this team has more talent than a lot of people think it does. Now, I'm not arguing there's major deficiencies, and we don't know who's going to play quarterback, and I'm not sure who's going to be the number 2 receiver outside of Jerry Jeudy, and that concerns me. But I like the running backs. I like the improvement at tight end, and I think the defense has a chance to be really good. So you throw all that stuff together, and I can see a way to win some games here. I guess that's what I'm saying. Now, I'm not going to go overboard, but right now I would take the over.
Well, when I said 6 games, 5 or 6, I'm basing that on the fact that everything I've heard the last few days from the fan base is like, not everyone, but there's so many that feel they're going to win 2 or 3 games only.
Yeah, I get it. And you can go through and play it that way. I mean, if you get off to an 0-5 start, which isn't out of the question, then everything is out the window. Then you don't know who's going to play quarterback. Are you just playing the rookies? What's the vibe? Are they trading some of the veterans? So I could see it go like sideways, whatever's worse than sideways. I could see the season going that way. But that's a hard approach to take in May. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can happen. I just don't think you need to be that negative right now. I understand if fans are, but I tend to agree with you, Chud. People speak in extremes, number one. And number 2, if you look at last year, a whole bunch of stuff went wrong last year. The turnover margin was awful. They didn't get any turnover, on defense, they didn't create any. And on offense, they turned it over a ton. Well, you would think that would change. I know that's a focus of Kevin Stefanski's this year. So if that comes closer to the mean where they're even or they get a plus turnover ratio, then all of a sudden you win some of those games on the margins. and maybe you're healthier this year. They had bad health luck last year. So I think there's reasons to believe that they're going to be better than last year. And they won 3 last year. So getting a 5 or 6 or 7, that doesn't seem like too big a leap to me. Now, like I'm going to say it for the 100th time, and we're going to say it every week that we do this, Judd. Who's playing quarterback is going to have a huge say in this. You know, if you start Joe Flacco week 1, is there some confidence that he can go throw for throw with Joe Burrow? Yes. And will the offense operate efficiently? Yes. Do I feel less good about that with Kenny Pickett? Maybe. Are the rookies a huge wild card? Yes. So that's the backdrop to all of this.
Mm. Well, did you have a big schedule party, Scott? Like, I mean, I know, big time of the year.
Oh, well, I played softball that night, Chud, so we did go to the bar after and talk schedule for a little bit. That was about it.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I wasn't as into it this year as normal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to where the Browns are. That last season, and I'm not telling anybody listening to this anything they don't know, that was such a killer for enthusiasm and where people felt about Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and the whole organization coming off 11-6 in that playoff in 2023 with Joe Flacco. The vibes, and I'm not a huge fan of that word, but the vibes were so good. And then you go back to Deshaun Watson. He's terrible. He gets hurt. And just the disappointment when expectations were so high going into last year that it's had a lasting impact. The hangover is real, and it's still real. It's 4 months after last season ended, and I don't blame the fans for that, but that's just how it is. And I think the draft helped, but you didn't get your quarterback at number 2, and then we have the whole Gabriel Sanders thing. So it's interesting. It's interesting where the fans are, where this organization is, and where they go from here.
Yep. All right, Scott, before we go, you got anything else for us here?
Yeah, just real quick. If anybody saw it on Thursday, we're taping this Friday morning. So on Thursday, Charles Woodson, the Hall of Famer from Fremont, who's the Athletic had the story, then I confirmed it, is going to buy or plans to buy. I think we'll have an official announcement at some point. A really small stake in the Browns. He's going to buy 0.1% from the Haslams. As far as I can remember, it's the first time the Haslams have sold any kind of interest in the team. Now, obviously, 0.1%, he's not going to have any kind of say in what's going on, but it's just interesting. He's a big name, an Ohio native, won the Heisman. Before Travis Hunter this year, he was the only kind of two-way player to win the Heisman back in 97, and goes on to have an 18-year Hall of Fame career playing defensive back for the Raiders and Packers. And then, the stadium thing won't go away, Chud. And, Roger Goodell was in Columbus earlier this week lobbying the state legislature and Governor DeWine to try to get the Browns, try to get the funding for the Dome Stadium in Brook Park. And Cleveland's, Mayor Justin Bibb and County Executive Chris Ronayne continue to fight it. And they want the current stadium to be renovated. And the Browns have moved on from that. They're all in on Brook Park in the Dome Stadium. So the latest is Thursday. The Browns released a letter that they sent to Ronayne. And it's just, they're just taking shots at him and telling him to get on board with the move to Brook Park. And they're saying his facts aren't correct. And they're laying out their facts, and I'm saying facts. That's the word they use. There are a lot of opinions in the facts, but they're making their argument why it's better for the whole area, including the county, for the stadium to open in Brook Park, and they think it's good for Cleveland too, because Cleveland won't have any of the financial responsibility, but will have the gains from people eating and staying in downtown. when games are in Brook Park and they're visiting to watch the games. And the last part, which I think is interesting, is the Browns tell Ronayne that they will do this without the county money. And they need the state money, and that's what we're waiting for, the state budget at the end of June to be finalized and see if the money's in there. They want the county on board, but they're saying they'll do it without the county. And I don't know if threatening is the right word, but telling the county that the county's going to miss out if they don't get on board. So it's just the latest in what has been an ugly back and forth. You know, the relationship's deteriorated. You know, both sides say that they're still willing to keep the relationship open, but the Browns continue to go public with their desire and aren't afraid to take shots at the people opposing them.
I mean, Scott, do you see any chance that the Dome Stadium doesn't happen?
The only chance, Chud, would be if somehow, and I don't see this happening, but if somehow the Ohio budget doesn't have the $600 million in it, right? Whether it's from increased tax rates on online gambling or the bonds that the Browns, that's their Browns idea, right? The state puts all these bonds out, the Browns get $600 million and then pay back the bonds, and the state has a chance to make a bunch of money. It feels like that's going to go through, but if it didn't, if the Browns all of a sudden have a $600 million gap in financing, then they're going to have to reconsider. And then maybe the renovation of the stadium on the lake comes back into play. But I think they're going to get the money from the state, and then I think it goes through no matter what.
Scott, that Woodson story, what'd you say is like 1% or
0.1%?
0.1%. But how much money is that though? Like, did you look that up?
Well, I got my calculator out in front of me. So the Haslam's bought the team for $1 billion, and I'm sure it's worth more than that now, right? But I'm going to use $1 billion as the default and type into my trusty calculator here what I think means 0.1%. We get $1 million. So there you go, $1 million. You get 0.1%, and it might be a little bit more than that, but I think that's 0.1% of $1 billion. There's a lot of zeros in there. I think I got it right though.
Yeah. Charles Woodson. Back in the 90s, my first job was at WTVG 13 ABC in Toledo. And right after I graduated college, I got a job there as a news photographer. And in my first year, one of my assignments was covering the parade after they won the national championship. And Charles Woodson, that was very bizarre, being an Ohio guy going and covering that.
Wow, there you go. He was a player, man.
He was. Yeah. He really was.
He's an all-timer.
Yeah.
Cool.
No doubt. Interesting story there. Yeah. But hey, cheap plug for me.
Yeah, what do you got, Puck?
Got coming up on Go on Monday morning. I'm gonna start part 1 of my 3-part series on my journey with prostate cancer. What I went through, and I just want to try to help people discover more about prostate cancer, because I didn't know a lot about it before I got it, but I sure know a ton about it now. And I just doing everything from the signs and being aware, and then if you do end up having what you go through, and I'm not really selling it that well right now, Scott, because it's been a long week, but basically it's going to be 3-part series, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. And talk to my surgeon, my doctor, and just everything that you need to know about it. And just want to help people, to see what I went through, and so there you have it.
Well, I think it's cool. I'm sure. I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, Chud. That's cool you did that.
Yeah. Thank you. Cool. And then do we talk next week, or do I get a week off?
Well, I was going to say, we're going to have to play it by ear. There's nothing on the Browns schedule, really. I think the next time we're out there for a practice is OTAs. I want to say May 28th.
Okay.
If something pops up, obviously. Right now, it doesn't look like anything. I got some rookie stories I'm still working on and what have you. but I don't think we see him on the field again for a couple of weeks. So, so I don't want you to count on the week off, Chud, but there's a good chance.
Yeah, well, I know, you never know.
Exactly right. All right, well,
All
I
right,
appreciate
buddy.
it, bud. You have a good weekend. Everybody else have a good weekend. I appreciate everybody listening. As always, this has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast. And you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.